Welcome to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. Here's your host, the Bitcoin Boomer himself, Gary Leland.
And welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin Boomer Show. I'm your host, as normal, Gary Leland here, the original Bitcoin Boomer. That's right, I'm a boomer, but it's pretty apparent. I can tell every morning when I look in the mirror, so I'm sure you can tell for sure. But on this show, we just try to educate you about Bitcoin. That's all we're going to do. We bring on great guests in hopes of helping you learn something about Bitcoin. My great producer, Stephanie, is here. Stephanie, you pre-see everything we're doing. So you were looking at the Bitcoin Veterans and Mike's page. Our guest is Mike Hobart. Mm-hmm. What did you think of what's coming up here?
So Mike Hobart at the bitcoinveterans.org situation. I guess my question is around, is the veterans part regarding military veterans, or is it they've been in Bitcoin forever since the beginning and they're veterans of that?
Well, that's a good question. I never thought of it, but I knew it was veterans of war veterans.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, veterans of the Army.
Answers my question quick.
Yeah. So yeah, it definitely is people who have served in have served the country, and they're a veteran now. But I could see where you would think that it was people who've been in Bitcoin a long, long time. Yeah, I'm a veteran of Bitcoin. I've been doing this for 13 years. So I think that's kind of funny. But yeah, Mike Hobart is with us. He's co-founder of the Bitcoin Veterans Group, and they have veterans doing all kinds of things he's going to tell us about. And I think you're really going to be surprised about all the things that the veterans are doing, or people in general are doing. But he's got a great group there, so do check out their site and we'll find out more about it. And as I say over and over and over and over, I say this a lot, so that's why I use so many overs. I am not trying to sell you any Bitcoin. I don't have any Bitcoin to sell you. And if I ever ask you to send me some money, well, then that's probably not me. That's a scammer making like they're me. So on this show, all we want to do is educate, because I truly believe if you watch this show long enough, if you join us every week for an episode, within a few months, short months, you're going to really start understanding what's going on in Bitcoin. And you will probably know more about Bitcoin than anyone in your peer group. So do join us every week, week after week, for the Bitcoin Boomer Show. Now we're going to go to a commercial break, and we'll be right back with Mike Hobart from the Bitcoin Veterans Group as soon as we get back. So we'll see you in a minute. And welcome back to the show. As I said earlier, I'm Gary Leland, the Bitcoin Boomer. In this show, I just want to make sure you understand before we get going. This show is for anyone. I just happen to like Bitcoin, and I'm a boomer. That's why it's the Bitcoin Boomer Show, not that you have to be a boomer to watch it. But it is good for all boomers to watch. But the goal of our show is strictly to educate you on Bitcoin. I don't have any Bitcoin I want to sell you. I'm not selling Bitcoin. I'm not even going to tell you where to get Bitcoin. I just want to talk to you about Bitcoin. I try to bring great guests on the show also that can give you your insight. And today I have one of those great guests. I have Mike Hobart from Bitcoin Veterans. That's right, from Bitcoin Veterans. This is a pretty interesting story. He's co-founder. And let's talk to Mike and find out what the scoop is. How you doing, Mike? Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Gary. Thanks for having me on, man. I'm excited to talk to you guys about just the intersection of the whole Bitcoin world and how it's relevant to the whole veteran space and all that, man. We're gonna get into a lot of topics here, I think.
Sounds good. There's one thing I always enjoy talking about. I enjoy talking about it so much that whenever I go out to a party with my wife, she tells me I'm not allowed to talk about it, and that subject is Bitcoin. I can always talk about Bitcoin. Yeah, I'm in trouble nowadays when someone comes up and asks, hey, you're kind of in Bitcoin. Can you tell me a little about it? And I go, no, I'm not allowed to talk about it. So that's the way it is. But give us a little bit, just a short bio on yourself.
Short bio. So my background is extremely diverse or varied. I went to college for exercise science, was in the military as an aircraft hydraulics specialist for 6 years with the Army. Other than that, I got exposed to Bitcoin during my military career while I was preparing for deployment. Spent all of deployment researching it, got into it super hard, never stopped. 2020 came around, lockdowns kicked in. I started writing a lot of the stuff I was thinking about. That got me exposure to Bitcoin Magazine, and then I ended up getting hired as communications manager for Great American Mining for 2022 before we got acquired by Crusoe Energy. So that's a really roundabout gist of my background and my exposure to Bitcoin.
Wasn't Marty Bent working for them?
He was, but by the time that I joined the team, he and a couple of guys had split off to do Cathedra mining, which is a very similar kind of product that they've been working on over on the East Coast.
Okay, because I just knew that rang a bell, but I was trying to make sure it was where I thought it was at. So, so you discovered Bitcoin then while you were on deployment, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yep.
And then you're still with it, and you started the Bitcoin Veterans. I want to find out.
Yes.
Our co-founded. Tell us that story about when you decided to make it to scale it out, I guess.
Yeah. So it's actually a pretty kind of, I guess you could say, homegrown or even like American kind of story. We all, and the five of us ended up getting linked up together because of Bitcoin conversations that were going on Twitter Spaces. And like Gary, like those the Twitter Spaces Bitcoin conversations tend to be going 24/7, like 365. And it just so happened that a number of us got into one space together, and then we started talking about how relevant the Bitcoin conversation is to both currently enlisted and veterans formerly enlisted. And then it got to the point of where a couple of them just like came together and they approached me. They're like, "Hey, you want to start like this whole Bitcoin veterans thing? Like, we'll just do a podcast and just kind of hang out, provide a space for veterans in the space to kind of collect and like essentially rally together and talk about, anything Bitcoin, anything military related." Because there's a lot of stuff that veterans like to talk about that aren't specifically just like military centric, but are kind of like tangentially touching the subject. And since then, like we started just creating groups, kind of like little like mini communities for specific topics between the core Bitcoin veterans group or like say Bitcoin mining. We got a massive ham radio group where those guys are all concerned about setting up redundant kind of protocols for communications in case something were to go down that would not be super positive. We got guys that are building citadels, working on getting started with like homesteading. We've got guys that are all pilots that are talking about Bitcoin. Like there's just about any kind of group or focus you could think of. We got guys that are all talking right now.
So you have a lot of people then they're breaking down into pilot groups, ham operator groups. I mean, Citadel groups, and for those who may not be Bitcoiners, Citadels are like reserves, places that you Bitcoins can go if everything falls apart and be protected, like a Citadel.
Yeah, like self-sustaining communities, you can kind of think of it like that.
Yeah, so, and there's a lot of those being built right now. How many members are there in the Bitcoin Veterans group?
I'm really bad at staying on top of the number of individuals we have in our groups. I think the last tally was somewhere around 600.
Oh, wow, that's a large group.
Yeah, it's the notifications are impossible to manage.
We had a lot of veterans at BitBlock Boom last year when we were in Dallas.
Oh, dude, I wanted to be there so bad too. Like, I really wanted to be there. I have every hope and intention of getting a much larger, much more a larger presence at BitBlock Boom this next time around than what we could manage the previous times. That was kind of like the first time, and that was really that was under my wing. So like, I'm not the best as far as business goes, so I'm looking forward to roping in the rest of my team so we can put like more minds together, more effort, so we can get a lot more of a stronger veteran presence there. That'd be really cool, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like I said, I thought we had a decent presence last time, though. When they took the group shot on the stage, there was a lot of people up there. So,
Good.
so have you found out? Well, let me ask you this. You said you got into Bitcoin when you were in station. What made you decide? What did you see about Bitcoin? What was it that all of a sudden said, hey, I got to read more about this and find out more about this? I guess, what was your orange pill moment?
Okay, so this is where you're going to draw a pretty lengthy answer out of me. So when it got to the point of where I was preparing to deploy, it was going to be the first time in my life that I had earned a salary. And there's if you're not in the military or the Bitcoin or military or veteran communities, a common kind of meme is that the first freshly deployed soldiers tend to just blow all their money on really stupid purchases, like say like a Mustang or a Harley Davidson, because they have sales reps on these deployment stations that are giving out loans that you don't have to worry about taxes or interest rates or something like that, right? Like they're trying to suck in the easy money from the guys that are just getting it, and they're not spending it because they're overseas, and it's effectively burning a hole in their pocket. So my intention was to find a investment opportunity that would be aligning with a lot of the top investors throughout history. I was kind of briefly looking into investment strategy, and all the best performers had come to the same like relative conclusions of you got to take the Greg Louganis way, right? Like you got to go where the puck is about to be, not where it is. So when I was looking at investment opportunities that were available to me, and I'm just a poor Midwest kid, I looked around at what was available on the S&P and NASDAQ, and basically I kept tripping over the same kind of result, was that the investment opportunities on those kinds of avenues for people with my net worth were all the value would get captured by the time like they were actually on the open market. So, and then it came as it was about 6 months out from preparing for mobilization, where I had seen a headline in the spring of 2017 that Bitcoin had crossed $1,000. I had never heard of it really before. I mean, I might have heard of it in passing, but I didn't really understand it. And then like 2 weeks before I actually headed to Fort Hood, I think Bitcoin had broken like 4,000. And I was like, holy crap. Okay, this thing just tripled in value in a 6-month period, and all of that is signaling to me that like there's a lot of desire or a lot of demand for it, and I need to look into it a lot more closely.
Well, I tell you what, I want to continue more on that because I know that you saw that we were getting ready to move to to a commercial, which we are. We're getting ready to have a commercial break, but I don't want to end that story that quickly. So when we come back, we're going to complete that story with Mike Hobart. Be right back after these words from our sponsor. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. Thanks for joining us again. Today, we're joined by Mike Hobart from Bitcoin Veterans, co-founder of Bitcoin Veterans, and he's telling us his orange pill moment. And so far, you're going to Fort Hood. It's 2017. Bitcoin went from 1,000 to 4,000. And this is where you're at right now with this story, I believe. That gets us on track there. Yep. So you've seen it go in this 1 year period, quadruple. And the year's not over yet. The year's not over yet from what history reminds me.
Yep. And then as continuing down that thread, as far as history reminding us, later on in that year, would have been probably 3 to 4 months after I kind of first stumbled into it, was when Bitcoin had its big moment of ripping up to 20,000. Right, that's where it first kind of penetrated the mainstream media and the public zeitgeist. And like when that kind of
Mike,
bubble,
I just want to interject for anyone who's wasn't around back then. If my memory serves me correct, at Thanksgiving of that year, we were at $7,000, so it had gone up past your 4, but by the end of the year, it was 19,000. So for people who do not think that Bitcoin can jump 100% in a short amount of time, you don't know what's going on. You haven't seen it happen. I just wanted to, because that was a huge leap. Because I remember explaining it to people at Thanksgiving, and by Christmas, I'm like, holy cow, I'm a genius. But go ahead.
No, you're like it's perfectly placed, like your input, because at that moment when it was crossing 19,000, I was actually out in the field in Kuwait, we were moving around a bunch of cargo containers of equipment, and I kept checking my phone, and it was ripping from 15 to 17 to 19, and I was just freaking out. And at this point, I was known as the Bitcoin guy in my unit, and everybody was just like, Mike, like, shut up. Like, we don't want to hear about Bitcoin anymore. So I kind of took that as a signal to just maybe get a little more humble, stack some more sats quietly. But like the big thing that like that kind of bubble rip did for me was that it showed that it was something that was completely different from everything else that's available on the market. Because as we all know now, especially after exposure to the kind of COVID crash and all the silliness of the last couple of years, that if anything were to take off like that in legacy markets today, there would be all sorts of just circuit breakers kicked off. They wouldn't allow the price to get taken up that high or that low that fast. So that really like that moment where it crashed from like 20 back down to I think it was like ultimately 4 over the next couple of months scared out a lot of people. It really just confirmed to me that I needed to be more involved, not just like investment wise, but like kind of helping more individuals gain more exposure and more understanding to what's going on, because I do think that this asset is going to end up changing the world in a lot of different ways. And that's honestly also why I write on the side. I have my own Substack, and like I mentioned earlier, I've written for Bitcoin Magazine for a number of years. I have this thesis that I think Bitcoin is going to be kicking off like a legitimate second renaissance for like matters of history sake. And we can get into that if you want, but I don't know what other kind of questions you want to get down into first, because I can talk about a lot of things in this space and just kind of riff on it with you.
Well, I don't have anything particular that I follow, so I mean we can go anywhere we want to go. I do have to say though, when you're telling people about Bitcoin in your troop, in your group, and they're going, he's the Bitcoin guy, give us a break. You're really not doing that. People don't understand. You're not doing that because you're trying to pump your bags. I mean, you're not doing that because you think, oh my gosh, if I can talk these 10 guys into buying $100 worth of Bitcoin, man, my Bitcoin is going to go up. You're doing it because you truly believe you're doing him a favor, because all of a sudden you've seen the thing that's hard to see, because Bitcoin's very hard to see, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you've seen it, and you want to help everybody else to see it. But some people, no matter how much you try, you just can't make a horse drink, So I just wanted to say that real quick.
And there's I'm glad you made that comment too, because it's also particularly relevant for our soldiers and our veterans. Again, for those that haven't served or been exposed to it, the military might get quote unquote training as far as like financial responsibility or how to invest your money quote unquote wisely. But the trainings are awful. Like they're like I'm somebody who didn't enjoy like the scholastic or school environment. For anybody that remembers like the government classes or the finance classes in high school, 95% of like the experiences I think have been just it's boring as all hell. And when it comes to the military, it's even worse. Like there's not a whole lot of actual financial like education that is shared well in those conversations. And ultimately, a lot of our soldiers get used as basically, I would say, cannon fodder for poor investment decisions. Like there's a product called a thrift savings plan, which is essentially just another like kind of they're trying to attract a bunch of soldiers' money into a product that gets exposure to bonds or some blend of bonds and stocks, and it's just it's not doing it's essentially like a second-hand pension fund for military guys. And if you know anything about like the guys the guys and gals that are running pension funds, they're not exactly the cream of the crop of the legacy financial world. So like when you look at these other products that are downstream of that, it's undoubtedly even worse. And I just don't like seeing our vets and our soldiers getting negatively impacted by U.S. monetary policy when U.S. monetary policy and American culture are completely separate. It just grosses me out.
Well, it's definitely finances, as we were talking before the show, have definitely changed since in the last 50 or 60 years. I was telling Mike I I decided I wanted a couple of M&Ms yesterday, and I went to get a pack of M&Ms. It was $3, which maybe not sounding like a lot to some people. And it's not like I can afford $3 M&Ms. But oh my gosh, I just had to sit back and remember when it was a nickel. And the bag was even bigger. And I go, oh my gosh. And I was telling the girl working there, this has gone up like, what would we say, like 600% or something. So that means that when you're my age, those M&Ms are going to cost a couple $1,000s if it keeps up the same rate, which is true. And until I was in high school, we were on the gold standard, so there wasn't any movement at all. You never saw anything go up. I mean, Cokes were 6 cents forever. Gas was like 25 cents forever. Movie tickets were a nickel forever. But then all of a sudden things started trickling, and now look where we're at now. Oh my gosh, it's like everybody sees it.
Look at the cost of a beer. Like my parents have told me from times when they were like going to the bars that they could get like quarter beers and or even nickel beers, like you're saying with the M&Ms. And now you're looking at spending $8 to $12 for a beer at the bar. It's just like, you want to talk about inflation.
I don't even know how you do that. I don't know how you can justify pulling out $12 for a beer. But then again, I have a hard time paying $5 for a thing of water, when I go to the ball game.
Okay, we shouldn't be paying $5 for a thing of water. I paid $5 for a gallon of water the other day at the gas station. I was like, you have got to be flipping kidding me.
That's still way too much money, and what we're talking about here is what happened to our money since it went off the gold standard. It basically broke. I was having trees limbs cut down the other day, and the guy's giving me a quote, on it. He goes, "Can I ask you a question real quick?" I said, "Sure." He didn't know who I was. He goes, "How come everything's so expensive?" And I go, "Really?" I said, "Oh, you've asked the right person. I could talk about this forever." But it was just so weird. This guy must have been about 27, worked for this tree company, asked me out of the blue why everything was so expensive. Have you noticed how much gas goes up? So it's just a crazy, crazy time. I tell you, instead of starting another segment, we're going to come back after this word from our sponsor and we're going to let you kind of riff here and tell us, direct the show where you want to go. Do you have that much stuff to say? We need to let you take the lead. Try to keep it from being stale here. So we'll be right back after this word from our sponsor. So please stay tuned. And also, do me a favor, do your friends a favor. If you know someone who may be interested in Bitcoin, maybe they're not ready to buy it, but they'd like to know more about it, please share this show with them. Whether they're a boomer or not, we're going to give you some information, hopefully, that you'll find helpful. And if you watch this show every week, you'll actually kind of become a semi-authority or probably know more than anyone that you hang out with about Bitcoin. So do share this show and make sure to come back week after week after week. I'm Gary Leland, your host, and we'll be right back after this word from our sponsor. So please stay tuned. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. We're talking about Bitcoin here. We're talking about veterans. We're talking about state of money with Mike Hobart, co-founder of Bitcoin Veterans. Now, Mike, you were in Nashville for the big Bitcoin conference a couple weeks ago. And I know that you guys had a room for your veterans group to watch the live feed when Trump was speaking. I don't want to get into the politics of whether he should be president or not. That's my point, not my point here. What did you think about his speech, though, I guess? Because basically most of the speech had to do with Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form. I mean, what you expected at a Bitcoin conference, but like the entire speech was about Bitcoin pretty much, or something to do with money. So what did you, and what kind of reaction was going on in the room y'all had? Because I know in the live room, I mean, they were going kind of crazy in there for a while.
I thought that Trump speaking on the Bitcoin topic, I think he showed that he has gained more information and just kind of like briefing and education on what Bitcoin actually is. Now, that being said, I'm going to kind of pump your listeners' brakes a little bit. I'm not saying that I think that he's like some like full-fledged Bitcoiner or any sense of that matter. But from his public positions on the Bitcoin topic over the last couple of years, like things have radically changed just in the last like year to 6 months from what I've seen. Like particularly around because you like you mentioned Gary, he spent the majority of the time talking about Bitcoin, but at the same time, even if he mentioned crypto, he constantly separated the two, right? Which is very important for those of us in the Bitcoin space because Bitcoin isn't crypto. Crypto is a Bitcoin, but like most people outside of us, outside of this industry or this kind of like community or space doesn't understand that. And I think every time he mentioned the two together, he made sure to keep them separate, which I thought was big. And then talking about kind of just like the costs of the average American not being feasible for getting actually towards like an American future, in my opinion. I thought those were the, like two of the biggest things. And honestly, I might even be kind of like fibbing on that because maybe even bigger than the second point was that he talked about primarily energy and talking about how he wants to radically increase American energy and also increase how much Bitcoin is produced. I think those two are going together really tightly. And I think that he may have been orange pilled through the energy and Bitcoin relationship, similar to how I believe that Larry Fink also got orange pilled thanks to the whole Bitcoin and energy relationship. The money stuff is awesome and beneficial for the vast amount of Americans and people around the world. But I think that what Bitcoin is going to be doing through Bitcoin mining and energy generation and power distribution is going to change a lot more of society faster than what the financial aspects of Bitcoin is going to do.
Well, I thought the fact that he brought up the reserve, putting Bitcoin as a reserve asset, which also RFK also brought up that he wanted to put 500 Bitcoin a day into a reserve, if I remember correctly. So that was between the two of them. That's quite a bit of people wanting Bitcoin. 2 out of 3 candidates wanting to have Bitcoin. Do you know, I was watching a show about assets the other day, and it showed, we have oil in the reserve as a reserve asset. We have gold as a reserve asset. I think we have silver. Do you know that we have $2 billion worth of cheese as a reserve asset?
I did not know that.
What in the hell is that? $2 billion for the cheese? So wagon wheel cheese or Swiss? What is it? I just found
I was just saying, do they specify what kind of cheese? Like that'd probably be pretty important to know.
Yeah, it didn't. And how long does cheese last? I know they put it in that wax and stuff, but does it last long enough to be an asset class? I mean, reserve asset? I just thought that was weird. Okay, so we're just waiting on, I guess, the existing vice president to say that they're in favor of Bitcoin now, or crypto, one or the other, to have all three of them in favor of it.
I think it would probably be wise for her to say something, but it doesn't seem like she's going to, in all honesty.
Yeah, probably not. And really, a lot of people are one-issue voters right now. I mean, because that's a big issue that can affect you drastically, more than anything else possibly, according to how much Bitcoin you're sitting on. But you're sitting on Bitcoin, nothing else is going to affect you as much as that is going to affect you. So let's now go to what was it you take the lead, in other words. Go ahead and take the lead. What do you want to talk about next? I'm going to let you have the floor.
Well, so I really want to kind of like dovetail off of this Bitcoin and energy relationship, because I don't think like it like understanding where a lot of like the inflation today is coming from is a heavily kind of nuanced and rabbit hole-y type conversation. So the bare basics of like the prices of goods and services that we're dealing with today, in one aspect come from the cost of energy, like energy generation, power production, power distribution, along with the currency debasement topic, which we've been touching on with the M&Ms and the beer conversation earlier. So like what Americans really need to kind of like get an understanding of is that we are not only dealing with rapid and aggressive currency debasement going on basically every day, like what we're at now to every month we're adding on another trillion, I think, or about 30 to 60 days or something like that. We're adding another trillion onto our deficit, which is just beyond untenable. And on top of that, we're also dealing with regulatory environments that are making it so that energy generation and production are like continuously more difficult, which is going to increase the cost of power. What Bitcoin is like doing is it's accomplishing a number of objectives all at once right now. It's fighting the currency debasement aspect with the 21 million sats or 21 million Bitcoin that are not going to be able, like they're just not going to be printed away, right? That's really important. It's like the hardest asset that we've ever seen. But then at the same time, on the opposite end of the problem, we've got Bitcoin mining that is incentivizing aggressive and rapid energy generation and power production and power distribution. Because you have one side of the Bitcoin mining that is incentivizing just broad power generation, whether it's a nuclear power plant or an oil and gas field that is producing natural gas and using it as fuel to power Bitcoin mining, which we've been seeing happening in North Dakota alone since 2017. Like the majors have been out there for years mining Bitcoin quietly, like ConocoPhillips, Chevron, Shell, like all those guys are out there doing it. They're just not publicly like bragging about it or talking about it. And then at the same time, we've also got actors like Marathon down in Texas who are playing the power distribution game, right? Because with the grid has issues with like power production and demand, particularly with peak hours, and the peak hour problem has been made worse with wind and solar energy, and which requires more just what I guess you could say, what would be the word, power kind of like arbitrage on the grid. And so Bitcoin is like falling into a series of these niches that are all over the place that need significant problems, or there's significant problems that have like relatively simple solutions, but the simple solutions aren't like exactly easy. And between the currency debasement and the power generation incentivization, I think we're going to see a major societal shift over the next 20, 30, 50 years. One of the biggest ones, particularly with the energy aspect, and what kind of started this riff on was the cost of energy. Bitcoin. So like before Bitcoin mining came to the conversation, energy infrastructure had to be expanded in a step function while the population kind of grows in a relatively linear curve, right? It looks like a law of large numbers. Like the line is going to explode up and to the north and to the right, and then it's going to slowly start to taper off and look like it's plateauing at the top. And when you have a line like that and you're dealing with infrastructure, you can't really expand infrastructure at the same rate. So Bitcoin's going to allow that to explode much higher, and we can continue on after this little break here if you want. But
that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. Okay, we're going to take a break, and then we'll be right back with Mike, and we'll get back more into energy and Bitcoin. Be right back after these words from our sponsor. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. I hope you're enjoying today's show. And as I said earlier, please share the show with your friends. We're joined today by Mike Hobart, co-founder of Bitcoin Veterans. And Mike, when I cut you off, you were still on your energy flow. So continue, please.
Yep. Yeah. So picking back up with the whole kind of issue with societal expansion and energy infrastructure expansion is that the two can't expand at the same rate. When you're building out a construction project and something that's going to radically increase and rapidly increase the availability of electrons to a community, you're not going to really do that at any sort of like slow progressive rate. You're going to expand it rapidly, and it's going to stay that way. The infrastructure is going to stay at that level or that kind of exposure for any extended period of time, and then there's going to be another project to expand it. It looks like a step function. What Bitcoin mining does to the entire calculus of that equation is that it allows for the power generation, power distribution kind of line to go straight up. You could say, so for example, one of my favorite examples for this particular topic is that now with Bitcoin mining, you could take a future nuclear reactor project that you're waiting to break ground on. Say there's still like you have to have the grid infrastructure tie in, like substations, all that stuff. you can have the nuclear project break ground, get to the point of where it's operational, it's producing power, have Bitcoin miners there on site immediately to take on that demand for a cost, whatever that cost is deemed to be necessary or worthy, and then immediately allowing that project to earn revenue while the rest of the kind of like infrastructure tie-ins are completed and built out. Because there aren't a whole lot of communities that are comfortable with a nuclear reactor being a couple miles outside of town, right? It's usually like 5, 10, 15, 20 miles outside of town. People are still afraid of like meltdowns and such. So like when you're dealing with something that far away, there's a lot of kind of societal aspects that are going to go along with it. Like, say I'm from Iowa. We had the Duane Arnold nuclear reactor facility out here in eastern Iowa for a while. And there were small towns that were benefiting from that reactor being there because there was a lot of business coming through and a lot of people that worked there. So you can look at it in a way of where the Bitcoin mining allows that kind of bridge or that gap to get filled, to where the nuclear reactor in this example could be providing 90% of its power generation to the Bitcoin miner until the societal demands increase to where the cities or towns around it are growing more because of the business that it's providing, because of the cheap and reliable power that it's making enabled. I see that as a recipe for bringing back a lot of like what the American dream has been lost, between bringing back cheap and reliable power, and then also Bitcoin providing an asset for the average American to just save as a strategy for wealth generation. We haven't seen that since Nixon went off the gold standard. So like that, I mean, those two combinations are just literally Renaissance. They're laying the ground for that next Renaissance that I think is coming. Because when you allow the average American or the average family to just be able to do something as simple as save to build generational wealth, it frees up a lot of time, health, and energy for the rest of the family to dedicate efforts to other things. I think anybody who's watching this would agree with me that when you're stressed out about money and you're working to make ends meet, you don't really have a whole lot of time or energy to do anything else that you might want to do. When you have the Bitcoin asset as a savings vehicle, and you have your distribution that goes in every month, if you're DCAing or you're lump summing every month or whatever, you park that Bitcoin away in your cold storage. You know that you have spiteful custody over it. Nobody can force it out of your hands unless you give it up willfully. These are all massive changes to the entire environment today that is going to allow the average American to really get ahead over the next, I would say, couple of decades, which might seem long, but in the grand scheme of things, when we're all living for our children to set them up for a better future, I think those are pretty great attributes to be looking forward to.
I agree completely. In a couple of decades here, I don't know, I may not make it to the promised land at 70 years old if we're talking a couple of decades here, but I'll stick with it as long.
I think you'll be fine.
I'll stick with it as long as I can. Hey, I know people dying every day. It seems like now it's kind of weird. Every day I hear somebody died, so that's what happens. We're talking about energy, and to kind of like swing off that topic while we have a few minutes here, I saw this morning, or maybe I re-saw it this morning. That Marathon's getting ready to buy $250 million worth of Bitcoin, and they're mining Bitcoin. And so obviously they aren't going to sell what they're mining if they're buying another $250 million worth. So this is kind of like the Michael Saylor strategy here. It looks like to me of getting loans to buy Bitcoin with. Do you see other miners doing that?
I don't think I've seen other miners talking about specifically going out and buying more. I think most of what I've seen is particularly what you mentioned, how it's like they're just keeping what they mine and then selling off what they need to cover capital expenditures, right? Which makes sense. But like the Marathon going aggressively and buying more right now, that's very bullish. I don't know any other way to put it, because that signals a significant level of confidence in the market right now.
That is bullish. That's for sure, especially since they're a miner. That's what really got me about it, is the fact they're a miner. But I haven't seen, their stock pump yet off of that. So I'm kind of curious what's that. Hey, before we go, we only have a few minutes left. Tell people where they can find you, find the Bitcoin veterans, follow the Bitcoin veterans. Give us all the social and stuff.
Yeah. So we first of all, we definitely want anybody who is a veteran that wants to get involved or see like what exactly is going on. Hit us up. We're most easily reachable on Twitter. It's at Bitcoin Veterans. It's nice and easy. You can reach out to us from the website here that is on the screen. It's bitcoinveterans.org. We also have a podcast. We have a YouTube presence, but we, believe it or not, between the topics of military and Bitcoin, we are pretty aggressively censored over there. You guys can still find us. It's Bitcoin Veterans. It's all super easy. You can find me on Twitter at the Mike Hobart. It's 2 E's on the, just because there's other scammers that are pretending to be me, or just a bunch of Mikes. So you can find me there. You can find my Substack if you want. It's linked onto that profile. It's Just Hear Me Out. The link is going to be the easiest on the profile, though. And other than that, like, you can reach out to me if you want to send me an email. It's mike@bitcoinveterans.org. Those are going to be all the best ways to get in contact with us.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out why you had 2 E's on your "the" there. I hate when those scammers clone your site or your Twitter page or your Facebook page and contact people. I had someone contact me the other day and said, "Oh, there's a fake Gary Leland on Telegram." I said, "Oh, yeah, there's been like 100. He goes, "Well, I sent this one money." That wasn't you, was it? And I said, "No, it wasn't. I'm sorry to hear that, dude." That's
good to mention. Just probably with especially the two of us and maybe every guest is like, "Hey guys, like, none of us personalities are going to be asking you for money."
Yeah.
So don't.
I'm not asking. I'm not going to have you send me a Bitcoin and send you 2 back. Just not going to do it.
Unfortunately, I'm not an African prince. I can't do that.
Yeah, correct. There, I don't have a long lost uncle over there for sure. Well, Mike, I do appreciate you coming on the show today. It was a last minute thing. I got in touch with you late, and you stepped up to the plate and came in. I do appreciate it. I also hope we get to see you at BitBlock Boom this year. We missed you last year. I have a Bitcoin Veterans hat one of the guys gave me, but I'm scared to wear it anywhere because I'm not a veteran, and I don't want people to try to think I'm stealing valor. You know what I mean?
You don't have anything to worry about with that, Gary. Just wear that hat whenever you want.
Okay, because I don't want. That's the last thing I want someone doing. Oh, look at him over there wearing that veteran cap. We know he didn't go because I admitted I didn't.
You're not going to get Tim Walsh from our group, so Don't worry about that.
Okay, sounds good. Well, until next time, I'll see you soon. We need to talk later in the week, Mike, about BitBlock Boom. For everybody who's watching, thank you for your time. We're going to come right back after this word from our sponsor, so do not go anywhere. We've got some great action still to come up with. See you in a minute. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. I hope you've enjoyed our show today with our guest, Mike Hobart from the Bitcoin Veterans. He had a lot of good information there, and I didn't know the veterans were getting together so much on Bitcoin. I think that's great. Stephanie, my great producer, what'd you think of today's show? And Mike, Stephanie?
Mike was great. You always have great guests, but today I was kind of a little mind blown when he was saying that the Bitcoin Veterans group is quite diverse in their preparation for the time Bitcoin can take over. And part of what is a Bitcoin fortress citadel, the way he went into it was just very fascinating to me. Pilots are involved, ham radios.
The Citadel movement is much bigger than just veterans, though. There are citadels all across the world that people are setting up for when the fiat standard breaks and the dollar breaks, that they can go be around like-minded people. The thought is that if the dollar completely depegs and breaks, Bitcoin is going to be worth $1 million, $2 million of Bitcoin. If that happens, if some guy's got 1,000 Bitcoin, he's going to want to get somewhere safe because everyone else will not have money. That's their thinking. So that's what the citadels are about, is protecting people and their Bitcoin in case it all comes crashing down. Now, before we go, I do want to make sure you know about my conference I'm hosting in Dallas, Texas. Next April, that's bitblockboom.com, bitblockboom.com. This is our 8th year, which makes BitBlockBoom the world's oldest Bitcoin conference. So no matter where you're at in the world, we get people from all over the planet. Please come check it out, especially if you're in Texas. I mean, I have people coming from Australia, from Europe, from South America. Do check it out. Also check out my monthly meetup I do, BitBlock Barbecue, at meetup.com/bitblockboom. That's meetup.com/bitblockboom. We have a great barbecue, usually once a month, so do check that out. Want to make sure you know about the place to find me is on Twitter. That's where I usually do most of my communicating and most of my posts. So do go to Twitter or x.com/Gary Leland. x.com/Gary Leland. I need to get used to saying X instead of Twitter. But what do you expect from a boomer, right? But that's about it for today's show. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. And as I say over and over and over, please share this with your friends. Do them a favor. You're just educating them, and everyone needs to be educated about Bitcoin. That's it. Thanks for watching. See you next week.